I want anyone listening, if they have experienced low desire and a drop in their sex drive, I just want you to know that it's incredibly normal and there's nothing wrong with you. And there are lots of things that you can do to assist and to build it back up.
Welcome back to Wildly Empowered Women. Today I have Eleanor Hadley here, and she is a certified sex educator, and she's taught the art of seduction on national stages, including Femcon and Sexpo.
The art of seduction really revealed itself to me.
Eleanor also hosts her own podcast, Sex, Etc., where she shares tangible tips on how to have better sex. Let's talk taking the best nude. Where did that come from, and what can we expect if we learn this from you?
Again, this one was something that just sort of came organically because of how I was living my life.
Welcome back to Wildly Empowered Women. Today I have Eleanor Hadley here, and she is a certified sex educator. You might already follow her on Instagram. I'm a big fan. She is a speaker and a writer based on the Gold Coast, and she offers one-on-one sexuality and embodiment coaching and practical sex education courses, including how to go down like a pro, sensual movement and lap dance, and how to take the best nudes ever. She's known for her embodied lap dance teachings, and that's actually how I started following her a few years ago. And she's taught the art of seduction on national stages, including Femcon and Sexpo. She's a content creator and regular featured writer for various different publications, so you may have seen her around in the media. And she shares her signature, informative yet cheeky and relatable style with her audience. She's also the resident pleasure expert for sexual wellness brand Frenchie. Eleanor also hosts her own podcast, Sex, Etc., where she shares tangible tips on how to have better sex, etc. Absolutely love your podcast, and thank you so much for being here today, Eleanor. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I'm excited to chat all things sex and pleasure.
Yes. And so apart from that amazing intro and, a little bit of your background, I am curious to hear more on how you got into, just starting with the empowerment that you give women in the sexual realm and getting in touch with their bodies.
Yeah, I can really trace it back to my roots in dance. So I was always a dancer growing up. And then when I was a teenager, I think I turned 18 and I started pole dancing classes, and that is what shifted a lot for me. I started going to pole, absolutely loved it, started feeling a little bit more empowered in my movement, to the point where I was so obsessed that I purchased a studio and ran that business for 4 years. And that was such a wonderful experience to see the transformative power of movement in my students in real time. I got to see them coming to their first classes, quite shy, meek and mild, and then just getting so confident over a matter of weeks. And I really, really wanted to continue this kind of work. And so I had a moment where I went through a big old breakup, and I was using dance and movement as sort of a form of therapy. And I decided that I wanted to focus less on the performative side of dance and more on the embodiment side. And so I ended up selling the studio and then starting my own movement practice, and then studying coaching and specializing in somatic sex coaching. And it's all sort of just unfurled as I've gone over the years.
And so what's been your own journey with your body image and self-esteem?
My journey, I feel like I've always had a pretty good relationship with my body, but there's this sort of insidious undertone in society that is constantly like, well, you're not quite good enough, you could be better. And I know that I used to focus quite a lot on that. I have tried really hard over the years to very much sort of dodge diet culture, and try to focus more on how my body feels as opposed to what it looks like. And a huge thing that informs my movement practices, and the reason that I sort of shifted from the performative focus to the embodied focus, was I don't want people to ever hyperfixate on what their body looks like or what it can do necessarily, but how they feel in their body. And I think when you focus on that feeling instead, everything else kind of falls into place. But when we hyperfixate on the external, that's when we feel disconnected. And it's almost like we're living up in our heads and our bodies are just sort of floating down below us and we aren't really in them. And so everything I do in my work is informed by sensuality, being of the senses and really savoring the pleasure that your body is capable of feeling. Because I think that we often we forget how good things can feel because we're too focused on all the noise, all the outside, the external. So that's been part of my journey.
Yeah. And the reason I asked that question is because I find when you see someone really in their genius zone and really making an impact like you are with all of your courses and everything that you teach, it usually stems from something that they've experienced and then they become the most empowering and impactful teacher on that topic because they're so passionate about it from a deep, personal place. So let's talk about embodied lap dancing because that is where I found you a few years ago, and I will never forget sending your Instagram page, or maybe it was one of your videos, your reels or something, to my best friend and just being like, oh my God, you have to follow this woman. She is so empowering. And it was, I think like your message at the time was exactly what you've said about like really being in your body. And it was such a different way of, like I'd never really seen that message of a lap dance being more about you than it is for the person you're doing it in inverted commas for, but really, we know it's for ourselves if it's really that embodied and empowering. Can you talk on how that came to be and what it is that you really offer in that course?
Yeah, the art of seduction really sort of revealed itself to me. So when I owned my pole studio, every weekend I would teach hens parties. We'd always get a big crowd of hens come along to the studio and we'd teach them just the basics, very much icebreaker, kind of cheesy sort of style. We teach them a little bit of a pole dance and then we teach them a very simple lap dance routine. It was always to pony and it was always just that kind of funny moment where you'd turn the song on and they'd all laugh, and we made it very, very silly, just so that it was really accessible. And so I had that experience of teaching lap dance from that view. And for me, that was much more of a performative approach because the jokes were, oh, this is for the future hubby and like, what's he going to think? And imagine it's him on the lap and things like that. And so that was my experience. And then fast forward a few years and I was at a women's conference and it was all about, femininity and embodiment, and that's my jam. And so at one point they had a token male come into the space and the invitation was to share a lap dance with this man and sort of see how it felt to be witnessed. And there was the offer for someone to volunteer. I was the first one, I think the only one that raised their hand. I was like, yeah, sure, I got this. This is my jam. I love this stuff. And it was wonderful. It was really fun. And, the guy was really respectful and held space very well for me. And I could just do my thing. I ended up posting that on socials just to sort of share the experience. And I was inundated with people saying, I want to learn how to do that. And so I decided to create my own course and my own teachings around the difference between what I call performative lap dance and embodied lap dance. It's very intentional that I use the word embodied lap dance because this is not for the other person. They're going to benefit. They're going to love it. But it's not for that other person. It's for you to feel absolutely incredible in your own body, in your own movement, in your own expression, and to allow yourself to be witnessed by your lover, by your partner, whoever gets chosen to be in that chair. And it's such an empowering experience. And I've taught this in person in many workshops around the country. And when we get to the end of the class where I invite them to partner up with someone else in the class and share a lap dance, what I love seeing is the reaction of the people who are in the chair. And often they get almost teary and emotional saying, that was so beautiful to witness. I can't believe I got the honor of seeing this other person in their power and like owning their sensuality. It didn't feel like they were doing it for me, but it felt like it was a gift that I was receiving. And that is such a powerful way to explore movement and to explore embodiment, that it is about how it feels, and the better and more juicy and delicious that it feels in your body, the more magnetic and hypnotic you're going to be to whoever is in that chair.
I love that so much, that it's for you, not the other person witnessing it. That is just so empowering. Absolutely adore that. I'm curious to hear, how do you get into your body? Like, do you have a practice? Is there something that you do to like really actually sink into your own body?
There's several things I do. You know, I think throughout the years, I've gone through different phases where I might commit to the full ritual and kind of make sure it's a whole practice. But I think the most accessible way is the simple pleasures and finding moments of connection to yourself in the mundane. And so it could just be sitting out on the balcony in the sun and closing your eyes and feeling how delicious that feels on your skin. It could be in the shower, instead of just quickly rushing to wash your body with the soap, like really tuning into how it feels when you're putting body lotion on. Again, like allowing yourself to touch your own body and to savor in those senses. I think the more that we can find these simple pleasures in the everyday moments, it's almost like they compound, and that serves to sort of spread out throughout your whole life, as opposed to going, okay, well, I need to now once a week do a whole 2-hour long full-blown ritual. Delicious. And if you do that, amazing. And I absolutely encourage that as well. But I think sometimes we can get in our own way when we think, oh, it has to be this long-winded thing that I have to like really sit down and do intentionally. And then we just never get around to it. So the more that you can access pleasure in the everyday, the more you're going to experience pleasure throughout your life, and especially when it comes to sexuality and connecting as well with lovers. So my practices are very much sitting in the sun, enjoying a bit of a boogie while I'm getting myself ready, self-touch, self-pleasure, taking like sensual selfies as well is a huge part of my practice, but just finding those moments that feel really good.
Yeah, I think the music is a really beautiful tip as well, because it's so easy to do. You can be, you know, making breakfast, making a coffee, like driving. It's one of the things that I do as well. And I had the pleasure recently of witnessing some women in an embodied dance practice at a retreat that I co-hosted, and I couldn't actually partake because I have a 3-month-old and she didn't want to sleep. So I was, you know, on the side looking after her, witnessing, and I felt like that person that you described before, who had tears in their eyes, like being able to actually witness someone in their body. Like I witnessed 20 women fully drop into their body and fully like, and everyone had their eyes closed except for me. I felt like an absolute queen being able to witness it. Like it's the most moving thing I think I've ever seen in my life. And I have been present at the birth of a child, not my child. Like I've witnessed a labor. It was even more moving to me. So yeah, there's something to be said about music when you really actually allow it in as well, and into our bodies as females too. Like, you know, our bodies are supposed to move. Like we're, you know, I know that you're a Taurian. I'm a Taurian too. We're sexual beings. And also,
yes,
we really are. I've always been described as like, you know, she's the sexual one. I was like the Samantha out of the 4 Sex and the City characters in my friends. And also I feel inherently women are, and we get to be that if we actually allow the time to connect with ourselves, which often that is what it comes down to, is actually like allowing the time and prioritizing the time to just little moments here and there, like just drop in.
Definitely. I always say that with music, if you can find music that inspires breath and makes you sort of almost melt, that's going to be like, that's the goods. That's so delicious. And if you can allow yourself to just move along to music like that, it's going to feel really, really yummy in your body.
Love that. And so you mentioned sensual selfies before. Let's talk taking the best nude. Where did that come from, and what can we expect if we learn this from you?
Again, this one was something that just sort of came organically because of how I was living my life. I shared earlier last year or mid last year on my stories that I had just taken some amazing selfies and I wasn't dating anyone at the time. And I was like, who should I send this to? And so I actually asked a close friend of mine and I said, I just took a great nude. Would you like to see it? And she's like, absolutely. And so I sort of shared that story and how, we should send our friends our nudes and celebrate ourselves. And it became this whole conversation around being able to share your sensual selfies and not feel like they have to be for the purpose of sexual gratification, but instead sensual celebration. So that became a whole conversation. And at the time, I actually had a group where strangers joined and shared their own, which was really fun. And it inspired me to create a course all about how to take your own nudes. And it's such a fun process because I think sometimes we can just assume, okay, well, you would only ever take nudes for the purpose of sending it to a lover. And that's absolutely a huge aspect of it because I think that's a really fun practice when you do it safely and mindfully. But even just taking them for yourself, for your own little nudes bank of I'm really hot, amazing. That is my evidence right there. And having it in the bank or sharing with friends and kind of celebrating your form, I think is such a beautiful, beautiful way of expressing and seeing yourself as art. And so I created this course that was all around how to take the best nudes for your lighting and posing and position and place and finding the way that you can see yourself as the subject of a piece of artwork. And so it's a really, really fun practice, and it's something that I suggest that everybody gets in the habit of doing. You can save them safely away so nobody else sees them if you don't want them to be shared, but just for your own self as a practice of self-love, taking these sensual selfies is so empowering.
Absolutely love that. I actually had a professional little naked shoot down at a beach near me when I was about 7 months pregnant, and it actually was the most empowering, beautiful shoot I think I've ever had. And I have shoots, personal branding shoots every 3 to 6 months, and being naked while pregnant there's just something about it, you're so connected with your body. And I remember there was it was between 6 and 7 a.m. and there was this bunch of surfers out in the water, and I was like, I wonder what they're thinking. This random pregnant chick, I was all over the rocks, getting really red, and she's snapping away. She's like, oh yeah, you look amazing, and we were really getting into it. I was like, I hope they do that and realize that this is what it gets to be, being so connected to your body, especially being a mum too, which brings me to my next question. I asked my Instagram followers, I was really excited to have you on the podcast, and I asked them, what is one question you would love to ask Eleanor? If there was one question that would really enhance, improve, or empower your sex life, what would it be? And all of the answers were around bringing back your sex drive and feeling intimacy and wanting to feel intimacy with your partner after kids. So I imagine a lot of your clients would probably be in the same place. So is there any advice that you can give for mums in that situation?
Before we go on, I want to ask you a super powerful question. What would it mean to you to make decisions based on your soul rather than your bank balance? Freedom to me means having true autonomy and choice in your life to live based off your values and soul's desires, rather than what you can purely afford for you and your family or what your job requires of you. This is why I've been empowering women for the past almost 5 years to earn more with pleasure, earning your true worth without the insane hustle and with actually having choice in your life. It is so much more about how you earn rather than what you earn. If you'd like to learn more about how I mentor women to earn a time-leveraged income online selling conscious, health-based products, and learning the skills of personal branding and attraction marketing, both very sexy skills to have, then click on the link in the show notes or DM me the word info on Instagram so we can have a proper chat. I love having one-on-one convos with you savvy queens and showing you how this kind of income and our community can help you truly live wildly empowered. Big love, back to the episode.
Libido is absolutely one of the most common topics that I have brought to me by students and clients. It's something that a lot of people really struggle with, and in particular after parenthood, new parenthood, it can definitely shift quite a lot, and it can be really confronting to suddenly have a different relationship to your sexuality as you used to. Now, I'm not a mother, I'm not a parent in any way, and so I haven't had that experience of having such a different relationship to my sexuality and having so many things shift and change after becoming a parent. But it is incredibly normal for our libido to change over the course of our life, regardless of whether you're a parent or not. And I think what often happens is that we feel like there's something wrong with us if we suddenly aren't craving sex as much as we used to, or if it's just regularly pretty low. There's a lot of factors that can impact our libido and our sex drive. And it's an incredibly nuanced topic and not something that I can say, okay, well, just take this tablet, this supplement, and everything's going to be fine. Or just do this one embodiment practice and that'll fix it. It's quite multifaceted. And so there's a lot of different things that will impact your libido. Now, if you're a new parent, of course, you've got your lack of sleep to contend with. The status of your relationship and the dynamic of your relationship has shifted a lot. You're no longer number one for one another, your child is. And the lack of sleep and the potential arguments and trying to navigate a brand new phase of your life, the stress levels, all of these things can play a big factor in your libido. Not to mention hormonal changes have a massive impact as well. And so it's really important that firstly, we're really gentle with ourselves when we notice these shifts in our libido, and we don't get sort of hard on ourselves about wanting to just be back to before immediately. We need to recognize that there's a lot of factors at play here. And so I always like to kind of work from the inside out when it comes to my coaching and personally working on these particular topics. We need to first recognize the conditioning that is at play. Is there part of us that is thinking, oh, I need to be super sexually appealing all the time? Is there part of us that thinks, oh, I can't be a sexually liberated woman and a mother? Because that's a really, really common story that we get sort of shoved on us from society. It's called the Madonna whore paradigm, that complex that tells us that either you're a sexual being or you're a mum and you can't possibly be both. And that's a really, really damaging rhetoric that can impact us, even if we don't necessarily cognizantly realize that that is impacting us. It can play a huge role. And so we need to sort of start by understanding our own stories, and then we can start looking at our physical body, so our hormones, our sleep, our stress. Are we experiencing grief or career transitions, life transitions, things like that? And then also the relationship factors. Do I feel like this partnership is equal? Or do I feel like I'm raising my partner like they're another child? Do I feel like there's some underlying resentment? Because we often don't realize there's these underlying things that are shutting down our desire. And it's not as simple as saying, oh, well, you didn't do the dishes and that's why I don't want to have sex. It's you have consistently throughout our 4-year marriage not done certain things that I've asked you to do, and I don't feel like I can trust you anymore, and I feel frustrated. And it's much deeper And so that kind of thing can kind of fester in a way and shut our desire down as well. And then a really, really important aspect that we need to consider is the different approaches to sex and arousal and desire. And so there's two different levels of desire, if you will, or types of desire, and they are spontaneous and responsive. And this is quite a nuanced topic, but as an overview, a lot of culture sees sex and desire through the lens of spontaneous desire, which is I can be doing something that's not even remotely sexually relevant, and suddenly I'm like, oh, I'm horny, I'm turned on, I'm ready to go, let's have sex. And that's quite a quick ignite into sex and pleasure. And there's a lot of us that don't experience that spontaneous desire for sex out of the blue, but we need to respond to something that is sexually relevant. And this is responsive desire. And if we're talking in the gender binary, it's around 73, I think, % of women tend to have a responsive desire. And majority of men tend to have a spontaneous desire. But that's not like a hard and fast rule. It's not black and white. A lot of people are the opposite, and a lot of people are mixed depending on the context. And so for people with a responsive desire, we aren't just going to suddenly desire sex. And so it can feel like, oh, I must have a really low libido because, my partner's over there like, let's go. And I am not in the mood. But I can be in the mood if you allow me to get into the mood because I respond to something that's sexually relevant. We're flirting first. We're listening to some audio erotica. You're doing something that's really, really sexy to me. Like I need to respond to something that's already sexually relevant. And then my body starts to catch up and go, oh, actually, yeah, cool. I'm ready. Let's go. Let's have sex. And the problem that often happens in relationships is partners have a mismatched desire type. And it means that I might go, oh, well, I'm craving sex at the drop of a hat and my partner isn't. That means that they don't crave me, they don't desire me. Or it could go vice versa, and I could be like, gosh, what's wrong with my partner just like all of a sudden wanting it? Like how can they possibly want it out of the blue? And we start to think that there's something either wrong with us or wrong with our partners. But really, it's just a different style. It's just a different type of desire. There's so many factors that I could go into about libido. It's a really, really nuanced issue. But I am creating work all around this to help people because it's a common topic. And I want anyone listening, if they have experienced low desire and a drop in their sex drive, I just want you to know that it's incredibly normal and there's nothing wrong with you. And there are lots of things that you can do to assist and to build it back up.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was reflecting on what you were saying and how I experienced definitely a drop in my libido after each child, which is, normal, as you were saying. And I've had 3 kids, and each time, like, there is no way you feel like sex after a child until you get to a point where you're actually feeling more like yourself. For me, it was like around the 3-month mark where I was like, okay, I feel like I kind of like come up for air. Like I've deep dived into motherhood of like 1, 2 or 3 kids, and now I've come up for air, and now I'm feeling a bit more myself, like in my body and in who I am, and like wearing normal clothes, leaving the house, like doing things that are sort of making me feel more like myself, even just being around people and being a bit more social. So yeah, like you were saying, really just actually getting to know what you want as well. Like that's really helped me, is like, well, what does turn me on maybe during the day, and then I can send some naughty text to my husband and we can organize it, because the spontaneous thing is very, very difficult with kids as well. Like you're often sharing a bed with them, or they're always home, or they're just like always in your face. So often we have to, it might be a spontaneous feeling, but the actual act itself is never really spontaneous. We've actually planned it. We've been like, right, let's put Bluey on let's jump in the shower and we're going to tell the kids that mummy and daddy are having a shower, right? So if they need us, we're there, but like, you know, we've sort of like planned it, or like we might plan it for when they're asleep, which, you know, to be honest, isn't very often because we're so tired at the end of the day. But, you know, it's like a little bit of a mixture of like the spontaneous and then also what actually like clicked that desire during the day for us to then get into action mode to make it happen. Yeah.
Exactly. And that build-up of desire is so, so helpful, especially if you have a responsive desire type, because you can go, oh, okay, I'm going to start sort of stoking the fire throughout the day so that by the time we have created this space to actually have sex, I'm really feeling like excited for it. And it's not just like I've suddenly come up to you as you're, you know, about to run out of the house and go to work and gone, hey, let's go. And you're like, wait, I'm so not in the mindset and the frame of mind right now to do this. And that also sort of stops the potential for rejection and the hurt that might come from that sense of rejection in the moment when you actually do have some sense of planning it, when you have very busy sort of lives and children to contend with. It really, really helps.
Yeah, and like the lead up is so sexy, right? It's like just elongating the lead up to it can be really sexy. So I've always seen it like with my husband, like we sort of make a positive thing of it. It's like, well, it's just like making us want it more. You know, the fact that we have kids to, you know, to work around actually makes it more. So as you were talking, I also was thinking of, you know, like all of the other factors at play and living a turned on life, which I love. The book Pussy, A Reclamation by Regina Thomas Ewer. I'm sure you're a huge fan as well. And everything that she teaches in that book, it's an absolute game changer for any woman to open that book and read it. Who have been your biggest users? Who have been the people that you've just like learned so much from and been so inspired in your career?
The first person that comes to mind is Dr. Laurie Mintz, who is a sexologist, sex educator based in the States. And her social media presence is really, really wonderful. I am very, very inspired by her and the research that she's done, along with Emily Nagoski, who is the author of a book called Come As You Are, which is, I think, essential reading for everyone. That book goes into the idea of spontaneous and responsive desire a lot. And it's just, it's such a game changer. It's such a wonderful book. And Emily's work is really, really incredible in the sexuality space, and researching around sex and desire is so fascinating. So those people I think are the people that I definitely look up to a lot. There's countless people on socials that I think are incredible as well, and am constantly inspired by. There's someone called Alex Wolf, whose work is wildly inspiring to me. It's not directly related to sexuality, sensuality, embodiment at all. She's a tech philosopher, which I know sounds very nerdy of me, but her work is kind of game-changing because she's got this way of looking at life through a Zen and Taoist sort of philosophy, at the same time of being very grounded in the real world. And I find her work incredible. Her podcast is wonderful. It's really changed the game for me a lot and reflects a lot of what I see in terms of sensuality and being of the senses and taking delight in the small things and not getting so wrapped up in this massive capitalist sort of patriarchal system that we live in, and kind of coming back to our own bodies and our own pleasure, I think is really, really wonderful.
Great suggestions. And I know because you studied life coaching, right? Like a lot of what you teach just seems to be very embodied in actually helping people have an incredibly empowering life, not just their sex life, but like all parts of it. So I'm curious to hear, what has been the most empowering moment in your life?
Oh, goodness. That is a great question. So the most empowering moment in my life, I feel like it's not necessarily a moment. It's made up of so many. When I sold my pole studio, That was a really empowering moment for me because it was part of a franchise, and this was me sort of taking ownership of my own life and business. I wanted to create something of my own. And so selling that studio and really backing myself in beginning a new career all by myself with not much idea of how to run a business aside from my experience running the studio as a solo business owner, that was a really mammoth moment for me. And then, studying life coaching, sex coaching, relationship coaching ever since as well has been so incredible. A huge pivotal moment for me was moving from Victoria up to Queensland. I left the day the borders shut back in 2020 and had no idea what I was going to do. I just sort of decided within a few hours I would leave, pack up my whole car and just kind of see what happened. And everything in my life has gotten a lot better since I made that decision and sort of backed myself in that way. So I think those moments where I've just sort of trusted that I'm going to be fine and I'm going to follow what feels really good for me, those are the moments that feel most empowering to me.
Love that, because there's such a beautiful message in not needing to always control things and having some trust in yourself.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So given you've mentioned business, I want to touch on this because you have been very successful in building your personal brand and, all of your offers and your coaching. What do you feel are some key elements, or, maybe there's only one massive one that has really contributed to you building up your personal brand and your business?
I went through a process of really doubting myself and being quite scared to share what I thought and how I felt and my views on the world. And I had to slowly get comfortable with that. And I've gotten to a point where I don't care very much anymore. It's just I am who I am, and I share what is exciting and passionate for me, and those who resonate with it do, and those who don't, I don't hear from them. It's fine. And so I really had to, again, back myself and allow myself to follow what felt good to me, because making myself small and shrinking myself because I was worried about what other people would think wasn't serving me at all. And at the end of the day, people don't think about you as much as you think they are. Like, people aren't worried about what you're doing as much as you think they're going to be worried about what you're doing and judging you at all. And so that was a really, really pivotal thing for me. I would also say to anyone in business or just in general life, but for me, a huge game changer in business was understanding my own personal human design. So for those who don't know human design, it's kind of like astrology on steroids. And it's incredibly resonant for me. I'm a projector, and I noticed that when I looked back in hindsight, the first couple of years of my business, I was trying to operate like a generator, which is a much more energetic human design type. I don't have quite as much energy, but it's more focused, and there's a lot of nuance to human design, but understanding that about myself was amazing. And I noticed that my business and my ability to attract opportunities grew immensely when I started following my human design and not trying to be and run my business like everybody else out there, and stop following other people's blueprints and just do what felt good for me. Everything shifted for me.
I'm also a projector, and I also used to act like a money gen. And when I learned that ago as well, it changed the game, because I was like, wow, what? I can just wait for the invitation. And it's crazy. Again, for me, it was a really big lesson to surrender and trust, and actually trust myself enough to attract the right invitations rather than needing to control them and go out and get them. So yeah, that's beautiful that you've mentioned that, because I fully agree with you. It's so powerful.
It really is.
Yeah. So in terms of your offerings, and I'm sure you get a lot of people, that you work with either one-on-one or in your courses giving you amazing feedback. What has been the best piece of feedback from a client that you've ever received from doing one of your courses?
This is a great question. I get some really cool feedback, I've got to be honest. I get like the really beautiful feedback around, my work having really like changed people's lives and confidence and self-esteem and things like that. My favorite feedback is especially from my course Tongue Tactics. I have an entire page on my website that has all of the feedback I've ever received, all the screenshots, because I've never received more compliments for anything that I've ever done as I have for Tongue Tactics. It's wild. So it's just people sharing with me how amazing their sex life has been since they took the Tongue Tactics course, and what their partners have said and how much pleasure they've had, the amount of orgasms that resulted, and like it's just so cool to hear that my name is being sort of like shared around like I learned that from Eleanor. It's really, really fun.
That is awesome. That must be so fulfilling. Like, what a message to receive. I'm having more orgasms than never before because of you. That's so amazing.
I know. It's really cool. It's really fun. I'm like, oh wow. That's a really tangible result. Love that for you.
Yeah. I love that. So, okay, what are you offering right now? If anyone wants to work with you, learn more from you, what can they expect in terms of what you're offering?
Yeah, so you are welcome to work with me as a one-on-one client. I take on 4 coaching clients for 12-week programs at a time. And then I also have quickie sessions, which are one-off coaching sessions. I've currently got 4 programs. So the art of sensual movement, the art of seduction, which is that embodied lap dance, Tongue Tactics, which there's 2 versions. So either Pussy Pro or BJ Queen, depending on who you like to go down on, and then send nudes. And in the works, I do have a project on libido coming out at some point in the next.
Yeah. Which sounds like such a wonderful course. I will definitely be promoting that for you as well. And so amazing. We'll put the links for those in the show notes. So please go and follow Eleanor. She has incredible content on her Instagram, and go check them out. Final question. If you could go back to your 21-year-old self, what would you tell her?
Before we wrap up this episode, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember how you discovered this podcast? Was it a friend's suggestion or an Instagram story, maybe a post? Somehow you found it, and I am hoping you're getting a lot of value from it. I need your help now to pay it forward so that other women can feel seen, heard, nourished, and more than anything, empowered from these conversations too. Big love, back to the episode.
I would tell her to prioritize her pleasure.
Adore that. I think we can all do that today. That's our homework, is how can we prioritize our pleasure today? I like to give a little tactical takeout from each episode. So thank you so much for your time. That has been wildly empowering, this whole conversation. And if you loved it, if you got loads of value from it and you're feeling turned on and inspired and empowered, please share this episode with another woman that you feel is, possibly looking for the same and really deserving of the same, which is every woman on the planet. So thank you so much for joining, Eleanor.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.